Look at this little beauty. I've always been a fan of this brand, Longines. Oh, I think it was one of my first ever investments, a wristwatch back in the 1980s. I don't know what happened to that. But back in the heyday, and this particular pocket watch was made in the 1920s, 1928, I think is the date on this one. These were the pocket watches to have. Look at this lovely Art Deco enameled panel on the back here. Kind of interesting. Longines were the official timekeeper of the Olympics and the watch of choice for aviators of the time. Charles Lindbergh wouldn't be seen without his Longines watch in the cockpit of his aircraft, and it was also the claim to fame for Longines to have the first chronograph in the world. And the first dual time zone watch as well. They really were at the leading cutting edge, but more about that later. Let's see if we can work out what's going wrong with this watch. It's not working, and it seems to be just winding very loosely. Just open up the back and have a look. Wow, that is a very nice, highly technical movement for the 1920s. The first thing that jumps out for me is it's got a snail regulator here, and these are all polished parts. These were only used by the very top brands of the time, Patek Philippe and such. Also, I'm noticing here a very Swiss thing to do, but these are the ends of screws. The screw head's on the other side, but these are polished ends, and we can see those throughout. It's well jeweled. It's got the center jewel here as well, so it's saying 17 jewels across the bridge here. And then notice the striping here, Geneva stripes, very pretty, and a lot of polished parts. Let's see if we can try that wind again. I tried it earlier, but it just... yeah, there's no pressure on it. I mean, I can hear the click going, and we can see that just here, but it's not putting any power through the train. I wonder if I could simulate that. I'm suspecting the mainspring has gone. Nope. Well, let's have a closer look at the movement under the microscope here, and we'll see if we can work out what's going on with it. So I'm just going to look at these wheels under the microscope here, and I can already see that we have a little bit of dirt to take care of. No surprise. Let's try that center wheel. I'm just checking the end shake. You can see some oils here that might not be too old. Just going to get rid of that hair. And the end shake and side shake on this wheel looks to be pretty good. Let's move on to this wheel. This is the third wheel. Again, a little bit of dirt here. We'll need cleaning out, but that's good as well. Again, we've got all these hairs here. It's possible our watch is getting jammed up, but I still think we have a mainspring issue to contend with. So this is the fourth wheel. I'm seeing a little bit of additional movement there in the jewel, but it's not crazy. And then that transmits power down to the escape wheel here. Oh, there's something going on there. Do you see that jewel? That jewel is moving. Let's get a closer look at that. Yes, if I just move the escape wheel here, do you see how that whole jewel is moving inside the setting there? We'll need to take a look at that. I mean, the escape wheel itself, I think, has good end play and side shake. These are these polished screw tips I was talking about. Let's try the balance staff as well. Seems to be okay. I did notice though on this hairspring, can you see that? A little bit of rust going on. I need to see if I can get that cleaned up. That might be a problem. One other thing I just want to check is if we can move our hands. See, the hand setting side is okay. I just pulled the crown out. Ah, okay. Well, that's good news. Longines used these serial numbers way back in the 1800s, and in their archives you can find information on every watch produced. In fact, they became so sought after they had to protect themselves with a trademark, and they're the oldest watch trademark still operating today. The wings and the hourglass. It's quite incredible to think of their history, the records that Longines had. I mean, they were big into sports, timekeeping, and even as early as 1916 had timekeepers down to 1/100th of a second. And they won awards in the 60s, the early 60s, 1961, 62. They had the most accurate watch. It ran for 45 days, and if you can believe it, an average of 0.03 seconds per day. Quite incredible for the time. Well, we'll get these hands removed. They're so tight to the dial here, I'm just going to lift up the minute hand first, work that one away, and see if we can leverage up that hour hand. I'll use my plastic sheet just to protect it and very gently put my screwdriver underneath, and then I can lift up the hand. This dial looks in really nice condition. So we should be able to just pop this out of the front. The whole movement should just drop out. There we go. I'll give these hands a polish up later on, but we'll keep them in this box for now. We'll work on getting this dial out. There's a few dial screws here. That should just let us drop the dial down. So even underneath the dial, look at these polished parts here for the keyless works. Not really ever seen except by a watchmaker, but they went to an awful lot of trouble here to finish these watches very nicely. Those are actually brushed parts as well. Yeah, Longines, Long Meadows, invented the first GMT watch. I mentioned chronographs earlier, but they made some special ones as well for aviation, for reading the stars. And that included a flyback chrono as well. I'm having difficulty with some of these screws here, so I'm just going to sharpen up the screwdrivers are a little bit. It's like these Swiss screw heads, they have a very narrow entry for the screwdriver, so getting a grip on them is a little challenging. In fact, with this one I think I'm just going to let some oil soak in and we'll come back to it. And these are Swiss screwdrivers, they're Bergeon. You'd think that we could get a good grip with those, but I guess that's the way they did it back in the day. And with any of these springs, I'm just going to hold these down before we remove anything. Too many experiences seeing these fly across the room. And there's quite a load on this yoke here with that spring. So I'm just going to see if we can relieve that. The setting lever and the ratchet wheel can come out. I need to turn it over here to get that setting lever out. And then we can start work on the other side. Here's what we don't do. Put the screw outside the frame of our movement holder, especially when we're putting a lot of pressure on. As I said, these are really stiff. I wonder why that is. I'm seeing a lot of tarnish on these parts as well. I'm just wondering if something's gotten into the movement in the past here. You can see that, look under there, under the balance cock. Well, we'll put this aside and take it apart in a little bit. Again, this tarnish here, look. Well, I just want to check to see if there's any load on the pallet fork, and there isn't. I wasn't expecting anything because I'm suspicious that the mainspring is broken. Oh, look. Look at the bottom jewel here. So this supports our balance staff, and it's completely cracked, destroyed. We'll have to replace that. Well, we'll get the pallet fork bridge out and keep working upstream. I did want to check to see if the train of wheels is operative. We'll just put some load on it, simulate it from the mainspring. That seems to be okay. I mean, it's not running very freely, but I didn't expect that. But there's nothing jammed. It's a barrel bridge plate. It does seem as though this side of the movement is tarnished the most. It's like an oily tarnish. But we'll get it all cleaned up. Get the center wheel bridge off. There's a leverage point here. And one here. Yeah, they're just sticky. Got it. And we can get access here to the train of wheels. I'll need to undo these, get access to the rest of the train. Yeah, look at that staining. This jewel certainly has seen better days. We'll take the cap jewel off on the other side. And it looks to be the whole jewel that's damaged. I don't think this cap jewel has damage, but we'll check that. I'll use some Rodico to lift it up. Yeah, we're going to need to push that out and find a replacement. But if I look at the staff, the balance staff itself, it's dirty, but I don't know about it. It may have some damage. We'll check later, but for now, it's time to start cleaning. Let's take a look at that mainspring. Yeah, as I thought, look, right here, it's completely sheared. This is what was causing the issue with our watch not winding. We'll need to get this mainspring out and find a replacement. There's a different style of arbor here. This is a screwed in arbor, normally requiring a special tool, but we'll get the spring out first. I want to dismantle this balance as well, take a close look at that balance staff, and also get all of these components cleaned up. Again, these have gotten some of that tarnish on them. In fact, I'm going to let these parts just soak in this penetrating oil before we undo them any further. I don't want to mangle the screws. Now on this hairspring, I noticed a tiny amount of surface rust, and I'm just going to hold this coil section here. We'll work it out with the pegwood just very gently, because I don't want to change the shape of the spring. In fact, we'll take this collet off the balance wheel. And we'll give that a good clean. I'll use 1-dip solvent for that. Yeah, I'm not sure if that staff has got a slight bend to it. I think it's best just to reburnish those pivots anyway. Had this in the penetrating oil for a few hours, and that's made it much easier to undo these screws and separate our jewels. So this is our top jewel, and that's the cap. It looks pretty good. We'll take apart our snail regulator. Kind of surprised to see this on this watch, but it's a pleasant surprise. Now, the spring that was stuck. Did that move? Yep, got it. Yeah, that's soaked as well. We can get this last remaining spring bar off as well, I hope. I'm also going to lightly polish these hands. I've already had a go at the hour hand, so start work on this minute hand here, just a light polish. Let's evaluate. Everything's out of the cleaner now, and the main cause of our problem with the watch was this broken mainspring here. And I've been able to locate, rather surprisingly, an original Longines mainspring for this watch. So I will need to undo the arbor out of this barrel here. It's a screwed on arbor, and then I will be able to put this mainspring back into the barrel, get that wrapped up. When we were taking everything off the main plate here, we noticed we had that broken hole jewel at the bottom of the balance, and I've ordered a replacement, so we'll get that jewel punched out and the new one put in. That acts as a bearing, and at some point it's gone damaged, cracked. We'll have a look at that when we pull it out. And it's possible as a result of that we have some damage on this balance staff at the bottom of the wheel here. And I looked at it under the microscope. I'm not sure, but it might be just slightly bent, and possibly we need to rework the tip as well. So we'll put that in the Jayco tool later and see if we can do some work on that balance staff. Hopefully it's okay. I did notice when we were opening the watch at the beginning here, we've got an acrylic crystal, and it's not terrible, but it is scratched up, so we'll polish this out, see if we can get that back to new. And then the only other thing I noticed is we do have some issues with magnetized parts. Take a look at this. You see that? We'll need to get these demagnetized. I did have a little rust on that hairspring we took care of, and the other last thing actually, just thinking about it, was we had a loose jewel in the escape wheel cock. So I think that's it. Time to start putting this back together again. Let's start with this mainspring. And we've got this screwed arbor here. I just need to remove that. And we'll need to find a suitable diameter here for the mainspring winder. Just got to go inside that barrel. And here's our replacement. Amazing, you can still find these original mainsprings. And we know it's original there with a winged hourglass trademark from Longines. So just get this wound into the winder. I should be able to put that straight into the barrel. There we go. It's pretty common that these old style springs are blued steel. And I just want to get the arbor to catch that into the spring with a hole in it. And I think I'll get a little drop of D5 oil here. And we should be able to wrap that up. Just remove any debris. I'm going to use this poising tool. It helps us just check to see if we've got some heavy spots on the balance wheel here, and you can see, yeah, just there. I'll need to make some adjustments on this balance. Just here I want to reduce the weight, so I'll use these to just undo this screw here and find another tool. Screw undercutters. Who would have thought there was such a thing? But we're going to cut underneath this screw here and just take some of this brass off. I'm also going to adjust these silver coloured screws. These are timing screws. We do them in pairs, so the opposite one will need to be done at the same time, and after a little bit of work, much better. So now I've got the balance in these truing calipers, and we can check the flatness. Just adjusting this measuring device here, and I can just see the air gap. Just check that that's consistent all the way around. It's looking pretty good, so now I'm just checking that it's also round. So we'll look down from the top, and that's in good shape. I want to get this jewel pressed out because we need to replace that. So this is a size 140, 1.4 millimeters. And just want to check that it goes into this setting here. And we'll get that pressed back in and check that jewel again. Now, I did custom make this setting on the lathe, and I'll put a link up here if you're interested in some of my attempts, but eventually I got one cut here that is just a little bit of adjustment, and I'll run this graver around the shoulder just to take out some of the material at the top here to get a nice clean fit for our jewel. And that's looking pretty good. So we'll put the cap back on after giving this a little bit of oil. This is Mobius 9010 oil, so the lightest train oil. And the pivot will just sit in that, and we'll need the same at the other side. So as we rebuild our balance cock here, I'll just put these jewels back together. You can see the oil through there. It just sits there. And I want to check that this balance runs freely, so I haven't put the hairspring back or anything else just yet. I'm going to fit the balance cock, and since we replaced that lower jewel, yeah, this is a little bit sticky for some reason. It should be freer than that. Well, the end shake looks okay. It does go up and down, but the side shake is really tight for some reason. My pivot gauge here tells me we need a size 12 or 1.2 millimeters for good side shake, but we've actually got installed an 11, and I'm wondering why it's so tight. This is measuring 0.08, but the other side is 0.1, so they're different pivot sizes. Okay, that explains it. We'll need to burnish this down so that they're the same size, 0.08, and then we'll be comfortable in the jewel that we installed. So I've set this up as a 9, for the moment, and then we'll work this down until it's a size 8 or 0.08. That looks good. Okay, one more adjustment. So they're both at 0.08 now, and we'll try that. Actually, this is a size 10 jewel, so it's a 140-10, so 0.1 of a millimeter. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, I'm happy with that now, so we can continue with rebuilding our balance. Side shake is good and the end shake is good. Just going to put the hairspring on approximately where I found it. It will need some fine adjustment when it's in the watch. Ah, yes, remember this? I'm going to need to demagnetize these parts. I think I probably need to do the whole movement actually. What a difference. So this is our snail regulator, and you can see the snail cam there, and that just helps make fine adjustments to the regulator arm. It's a nice touch. I'll just check if that's working okay. Just install that spring first of all, and that is a return spring against that regulator arm which pushes the arm against the snail cam. Just set that in place. It looks good. And we can reinstall our balance on the balance cock. Just want to make sure that that hairspring is located correctly in the regulator pins, and we can get on with rebuilding our main plate. I want to make sure that we put this part in first. It's the setting lever, and it needs to be in place before we return the bridge plates. Before we put this escape wheel cock back, I just need to make an adjustment for that jewel. And we'll pull out this vintage jeweling tool here and see if we can close down that setting a little bit. That jewel was loose. So I've got the right size here. I'm just going to see if this will do the trick for us. Oh yes, that's much better. That was something we found during the initial inspection, that jewel on the top of the escape wheel was a little bit loose. I'm not tightening this down just yet. Do you see here? It's just not quite in the jewel. That's better. That's the quickest way to destroy a jewel or a pivot. You tighten down on these parts without making sure that the pivots are in the jewels. Quick air blower test, and we can move to the next wheel. the fourth wheel. And this has the long pivot on it that supports the second hand. And the third wheel. And if you've wondered about the counting, the center wheel would be the second wheel, but you never hear it referred that way. And the first wheel would be the mainspring or mainspring barrel. A bit of oil. And we'll put our ratchet wheel on top. So make sure that that's seated down correctly. And we can get our center wheel in place. And so this bridge has jewels for the center wheel and also for the third wheel there. So it's a little trickier to set because we've got to make sure both of those wheels are engaged correctly. And I can see here the third wheel is just not quite right. A little bit of an adjustment. You can see the pivot there. Oh, that's it. That usually clicks into place nicely. And one thing I do want to make sure is we get the right screw on the right side here. That one on the left is much shorter. And typically it means they can interfere with something on the other side if we don't get this the right way around. So if you've ever wondered why your watch is jammed, check those. Okay, once we're happy, we can tighten these down. Mainspring barrel bridge. And just check everything. Oh, wait a minute. I've forgotten something here. I made a mistake. Underneath here, we've got to rebuild this part here, which is the crown wheel and the clicker. Quite often these will sit on the top of the movement, but not in this case. They actually live underneath the bridge here. And I also need to make sure that we put the click spring back as well. And this stops that ratchet wheel from going backwards once we start winding the watch. Oh, didn't secure that down enough. Let's try that again. Okay, that's better. Again, on this bridge plate here, there's a short screw that we need to make sure we put in the right place. I've just got to get this seated down correctly. Oh. Yeah, with the wheels underneath here, we've got to make sure the gears are engaged and the click spring is working correctly. Okay, with that done, we can turn movement over and start working on the keyless works. So with the winding pinion and clutch wheel in. And temporarily I'm going to put our crown stem and crown back in place here. I just want to make sure that I catch the other side. There's a small pin at the end of this crown stem and it just goes in a hole on the main plate. It's a little bit tricky. There it is. And I'll continue work on this side, and I did that so that we can put some wind onto the watch and check everything is okay. But we will need to remove that crown before recasing the movement. So in goes the yoke, and I just want to sit it into that groove in the clutch there, that's it. And the yoke spring. I'm just going to let that sit on top for now until we get it seated and secured, and then we can set the spring. A little bit of grease first. Okay. And then we have this other spring bar on the other side that operates against the setting lever. And you can feel that one when you pull out and push back in that crown stem. Just get that one set as well. And we can tighten it down. Yep. A little bit stiff, but that's working. So I'll continue on this side, and there's an intermediate wheel here that connects through to our motion works. And this allows us to set the hour hand and the minute hand once that clutch is engaged with these wheels. So this is the minute wheel going in. Lovely finishing again to these. And all these parts are completely hidden away from view. Okay. Well, that's working. So I'm going to put in the pallet fork now. And with this in place, it's going to lock the escape wheel. And that allows us to put some wind onto the watch. So make sure that that's seated correctly. Yeah, again, see that pivot's got to go through that jewel. So just patience. I have to push that down and move that backwards and forwards, the pallet fork, until it seats correctly. There it is. And now we can tighten these screws down. I will want to put a little bit of pallet fork jewel grease onto the ends of those. There's the lower one. Yeah. Okay. That seems good. So let's put some wind onto the watch here. And just check that pallet fork snaps back and forwards as it releases tension from the escape wheel. And now for the big test. Can we get this pocket watch to come back to life after who knows how long? Oh, wants to work? Oh yes, look at that. So pleasing to see these start up again. So make sure that as we tighten it down, it's all free. No, it's not quite seated correctly. Wait, there's something really funky going on here. I think we got a ghost in the machine. My pocket watch is haunted. Look, there's no physical connection here between the balance wheel and the escape wheel, but the escape wheel's moving. That is very strange. Look. Well, if it's not a ghost, then there's really only one explanation. Yes, it's magnetized. I should have taken care of this earlier. And we'll try that again. That's better. Okay, we'll get the pallet fork back in and try this once more. Let's start up. Yes. Okay, that's much cleaner. And we can start oiling these jewels. That threw me for a while there. Let's see what this looks like on the time grapher. Pretty good. 13 seconds per day. Pretty high amplitude. And a little bit of beat error. I think we'll make an adjustment here with the snail regulator and see if we can just get that finely tuned. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that, given the age of the watch and the movement. I could work on it a little bit more with the beat error perhaps, but I'm pretty happy with that. So let's move on to this crystal glass. Actually, it's an acrylic. I'll use a polishing compound here to see if we can clean this up a little bit. And do you like my new Patreons? No, not patrons of my channel, but actually sponsors and wearers of Longines watches. Just a short selection. How's that? Much nicer. So back on with the friction fit cannon pinion. And the hour wheel. At this point we can get our dial back onto the movement. We had those dial screws just to take care of to lock that into place, and we can put the hands back. These cleaned up nicely. I think these might be gold or gold plated possibly. Just want to make sure that they don't conflict. Okay, it's all looking good, so I just want to drop this crown and crown stem out, and then we can recase the movement. It's looking rather lovely, especially with its new polished crystal back in place. Well, we're coming towards the end of this restoration, and thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I just want to put these case screws back, and we can get this all buttoned up, and we'll secure the movement in place. It's turned out really nicely. One last look inside for you on the movement, and time to ponder the history of these beautiful Longines pocket watches and watches even today. With that, I'll just leave you to enjoy it. Until next time.